My uncle didn't want to make me a partner in the family business and chose his inexperienced son. So I joined their competitors, and now they are screwed. Hey, so I need to get this off my chest because I seriously don't know if I'm losing it or if my family is just that messed up. I'm Jen, 30 years old, and I used to work for my family's real estate business, used to being the key part here. The whole thing is like some messed up soap opera, but worse because it's my actual life. So, to give a bit of background, my dad, David, passed away about 3 years ago, and he was one of the owners of this real estate company. It wasn't a huge company or anything, but it was a big deal for my family. He ran it with his two brothers, my Uncle Peter, who's basically been in charge since Dad died, and my Uncle Greg, who, well, we don't talk about him anymore. I'll get to that. Growing up, I was always around the business. My dad would bring me in sometimes when I was younger, and when I graduated from business school, I started working there full time. And honestly, I loved it. I was learning everything I could, doing all the grunt work, proving myself, all that stuff. My dad always said I'd be a partner one day, and I really believed that. Fast forward 9 years of busting my ass at this company, and here's where things went sideways. About 2 weeks ago, I found out that Uncle Peter is planning to retire in the next couple of years. Naturally, I figured I'd be next in line to take over as CEO. Makes sense, right? I've been doing most of the work since my dad died. I know how everything runs. And let's be honest, I've earned it. But nope. Peter has a son, Mark, who just graduated from college last year with some fancy degree. And, surprise, surprise, Peter decided Mark should be the next CEO. Here's the real kicker. I didn't even find this out from Peter himself. No, that would have been too respectful. Instead, my mom casually drops this on me during dinner like, "Oh, did you hear? Peter's making Mark the new CEO because you didn't want the position." I was like, "Wait, what? I didn't want it? When did I say that?" Turns out Peter told my aunt, Mark's mom, that I declined the offer to be a partner and the CEO. First of all, there was never an offer. Peter didn't even talk to me about it. He just decided I didn't want it and handed the whole damn thing to his son, who, mind you, has been working for the company for a grand total of 0 days. I called Peter that night because I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe there was some mix-up or whatever. Nope, no mix-up. He straight up told me that he thought Mark would be the best fit for the future of the company. I literally laughed when he said that. Mark is 23 years old. He's fresh out of college and has never worked a day in his life, at least not in this business. I've been here for 9 years, running things, keeping everything afloat after Dad died. And now I'm just supposed to train Mark and let him take over? Are you serious? Peter tried to sell it to me like, "Oh, don't worry, you're still the CFO. You'll be guiding Mark and he'll learn from you." He even had the nerve to say that I'd basically be in charge while Mark gets up to speed. Basically? So I'm supposed to do all the work while Mark gets the title, the respect, and the paycheck? No way. I told Peter straight up that if Mark becomes CEO, I'm done. I wasn't going to stay on and babysit my cousin. Peter just shrugged it off like I was overreacting. He even tried to make me feel guilty, saying Mark needs this, and if he doesn't get it, he might leave the company like Uncle Greg did years ago. I didn't care. I told Peter if that's what he's worried about, he can go ahead and let Mark have the title, but I wouldn't stick around for it. It was a total ultimatum, and honestly, I was expecting Peter to back down. I thought he'd realize how stupid this whole thing was and reconsider. But no, he just doubled down and said, "Well, I've already made my decision." That was it for me. I realized in that moment that Peter didn't give a damn about all the work I've done. It didn't matter how much I'd sacrificed, how much I'd helped him keep the company going after my dad passed. All that mattered was keeping Mark happy. And you know what? I get it. Mark's his son. I'll never be able to compete with that. But it still hurt. A lot. I left that conversation feeling completely defeated. I talked to my mom after, thinking she'd have my back. But even she wasn't as supportive as I hoped. She said something like, "Well, Peter's just trying to keep the family together, and you can't blame him for wanting to take care of his son." Seriously? What about me? Am I not family? That's when things started to click for me. I'd been bending over backward for this company, for this family, but none of them really saw me as part of the inner circle. I was the backup plan, the one who was supposed to fill in the gaps when things went wrong, but never the one to actually lead. And I'd been too blind to see it until now. I wasn't going to sit around and wallow, though. If they didn't want me, I'd go where I was valued. So I made a decision that I knew would piss them off, but I didn't care anymore. I reached out to Uncle Greg. Now here's where things get interesting. Uncle Greg, as I mentioned earlier, was basically cast out of the family 6 years ago. He and Peter had some huge falling out, and Greg started his own real estate company. Ever since, we were told to treat him like he didn't exist. I hadn't spoken to him in years. but I knew he was still running his business and doing pretty well, so I sent him an email. I kept it short and to the point. Told him what happened with Peter, how I was passed over for CEO, and how I was looking for new opportunities. I wasn't even sure if he'd respond, but he did. Fast. Greg said he'd love to have me on board. Not only did he offer me the CFO position at his company, but he also said he'd make me a partner. And if I stuck around long enough, he'd even consider me for CEO after he retired. I couldn't believe it. After all the crap I'd just gone through with Peter, here was Greg, ready to give me everything I'd worked for, no strings attached. That same day, I resigned from Peter's company. I didn't even give him the courtesy of a 2-week notice. Just packed up my stuff, sent him a message that I was done, and that was it. And honestly, it felt amazing. So, things took a turn after I left Peter's company, and honestly, I didn't expect things to blow up the way they did. Like, I knew there'd be fallout, but I didn't think it'd get this bad. I joined Uncle Greg's company the day after I quit, and the vibe there was completely different. Greg's not the type to micromanage or treat people like they owe him something. I walked in, and right away I felt like I mattered. The team he's got over there is super chill, and honestly, it was refreshing compared to how uptight things were with Peter. No one walks on eggshells. They just get the job done, and there's none of that fake family loyalty crap hanging over your head. But then, the real fun started. Greg and I decided to announce that I had joined his company because why not? It's not like it was some big secret. So we posted a picture together on LinkedIn. Nothing fancy, just us smiling and holding up the company sign. And that's when my phone practically exploded. By the time I woke up the next morning, I had 1 million missed calls, texts, and voicemails from family. It was like they all suddenly realized I was a person again. I mean, I had just resigned from Peter's company, and no one said a word to me when I left. But the second they saw me with Greg, it was like the world was ending. Peter, Mark, and even my cousins started blowing up my phone, calling me a traitor and saying I was tearing the family apart. Peter was furious. I didn't even bother answering his calls at first, but after the 4th voicemail where he was screaming about how I had betrayed him, I figured I might as well hear him out. Huge mistake. The second I picked up, Peter went off on this rant about how I was ungrateful and how he had done everything for me. He said I'd ruined the family by joining Greg and that he'd make sure I suffer the consequences for it. I just hung up on him. I mean, suffer the consequences? For what, getting a better job? It was ridiculous. They were acting like I'd declared war on them or something. But here's the kicker. The rest of the family wasn't much better. My cousins, who never had anything to say to me when I was working for Peter, suddenly decided I was a villain. They started sending me these passive-aggressive texts, calling me selfish and accusing me of stealing from the family. The only person who didn't immediately lose their mind was my mom, but even she was acting weird. She kept saying stuff like, "I wish you hadn't done this," and "You don't know the whole story." I asked her what the hell she meant by that, but she just kept being vague, which was super frustrating. So I decided to ask Greg. I figured if there was some big secret I didn't know, he'd tell me. After all, we were working together now, and I wanted to know if there was more to the family drama than I'd been told. When I brought it up, Greg got really quiet and refused to tell me anything. Things only got crazier after that, though. Word got out that I was not only working for Greg, but that I was also a partner in his company. That's when the real fun started. I guess Peter and Mark didn't like the idea of me being in a position of power with their biggest competitor, because Peter showed up at my apartment one night with Mark in tow, banging on my door like a lunatic. When I answered, Peter was red-faced, like he'd been holding in his anger for days. He started yelling about how I was stealing his employees and how Greg and I were conspiring to destroy his business. Mark just stood there looking all smug, like he had anything to do with any of this. I told them they needed to leave, but Peter wouldn't let it go. He threatened to sue me for employee poaching, which I'm pretty sure isn't even a thing. But whatever, he was losing it. I ended up calling the cops to get them off my property, which only made Peter more furious. After that, he blocked me on everything. Phone, email, social media, you name it. Mark did the same. I guess that was their way of cutting me off for good. And honestly, good riddance. I'm not wasting any more time on them. I've got a new job, a better one, and I'm not looking back. They can keep their family drama, but I'm done with it. Update 1. Alright, so things have gotten even crazier since I left Peter's company. I thought the worst of the drama was over after Peter and Mark showed up at my door acting like I was some kind of criminal. But clearly I underestimated how petty my family could be. If anything, things have only escalated from there. After the whole door-banging incident, I figured Peter and Mark would back off, since I had to call the cops to get them to leave. They blocked me, so I thought that was the end of it. But oh no, it's like they couldn't just let it go. It wasn't enough for them to label me a traitor to the family. They had to go and drag the rest of the family into this mess. I woke up one morning to find my phone blowing up again, and this time, it wasn't just Peter and Mark. Somehow, they'd managed to get the entire extended family involved. Cousins I hadn't talked to in years were suddenly popping up in my texts, accusing me of betraying the family and telling me how disappointed they were in me. Like, seriously? These people never gave a damn about me before, but now they all had something to say. It was wild. Apparently, Peter had been running his mouth at every family gathering, telling anyone who'd listen that I was trying to sabotage the family business by joining Greg. He made it sound like I was some kind of corporate spy, like I was sneaking around trying to steal trade secrets or something ridiculous like that, and people believed him. One of my cousins, Anna, called me in the middle of the day, and I stupidly answered. She launched into this long rant about how family comes first, and how I should have known better than to work for Greg. I tried explaining to her that Peter literally forced me out of the company by giving Mark the CEO position, but she wouldn't hear it. She just kept saying, "You shouldn't have gone to Greg. You know how much Peter hates him." Like it was my responsibility to keep Peter happy, even though he screwed me over. I got fed up and hung up on her, but that didn't stop the barrage of texts and calls. Everyone was treating me like I'd personally burned down the family business, and it was exhausting. I ended up putting my phone on silent for a couple of days just to get some peace. The only person who hadn't weighed in yet was my mom. And honestly, I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. Part of me was relieved she hadn't jumped on the hate train with everyone else, but another part of me was worried she was just waiting for the right moment to hit me with her disapproval. A few days later, my mom finally called. I hesitated to answer because I had no idea what she was going to say, but at the same time, I couldn't avoid her forever, so I picked up. She didn't sound angry, which honestly threw me off a bit. I was expecting her to start lecturing me like the rest of the family, but instead, she just sighed and said, "I wish you hadn't done this, Jen." I asked her what exactly she meant by that because, in my mind, I hadn't done anything wrong. I was forced out of the company and took a better offer. End of story. But my mom wasn't seeing it that way. She said she understood why I was upset about the whole Mark situation, but that going to work for Greg was crossing a line. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, they crossed the line first. Peter completely screwed me over, and now I'm supposed to just sit there and take it? Why is everyone acting like I'm the bad guy here?" She got quiet for a second, and then she hit me with something I didn't expect. "There's more to this than you know, Jen." Of course, this was the second time she'd said something cryptic like that, and honestly, I was sick of it. I asked her what she meant, and she said something like, "There's a lot of history between Peter and Greg that you don't understand, things you don't know about." I could feel my patience running thin at that point. "Then why don't you tell me? Why is everyone keeping this huge secret from me? I'm not a kid, Mom. I can handle whatever it is." She hesitated again, and I swear I could almost hear her trying to decide if she should tell me the truth. But in the end, she just said, "It's complicated. I don't want to get into it." That's when I lost it. I told her that if she wasn't willing to tell me what was really going on, then she didn't have the right to judge me for making decisions based on the information I did have. I wasn't about to let Peter walk all over me, and if Greg was offering me a better position, I was going to take it. Family be damned. She didn't like that answer. I could hear it in her voice when she said, "I just don't want to see you get hurt." I was like, "Mom, I'm already hurt. I've been hurt for years by this family, and no one seems to care. So if you want to protect me, maybe try supporting me for once instead of making me feel like I'm the one who did something wrong." After that, the conversation kind of fizzled out. My mom said she needed time to think, and that she'd call me back later, but honestly, I didn't expect her to. We haven't spoken since, and I'm starting to think we might never have a real relationship again. And you know what? I'm okay with that. It sucks, but I've come to terms with the fact that I can't change how my family feels about me. They've made their choice, and so have I. I'm not going to let them drag me down anymore. Meanwhile, things at Greg's company are going great. I've settled into my new role, and honestly, it's been a breath of fresh air. Greg's given me so much more freedom to make decisions, and it feels good to finally be treated like the professional I am, instead of Peter's little sidekick. Oh, and here's the kicker. Greg told me that some of Peter's employees have been quietly reaching out to him about possibly jumping ship. Apparently, a lot of them aren't too happy with the way Mark's been running things. Shocker. And they're looking for other opportunities. I'm not gonna lie, it felt pretty good to hear that. Karma's a bitch, I guess. Anyway, that's where things stand now. My family's pretty much disowned me, but I found a better place to be, and honestly, I don't miss them as much as I thought I would. I've learned that just because people are family doesn't mean they always have your best interests at heart. Sometimes you've got to put yourself first. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Update 2. All right, so things have gotten real weird lately. If you've been following along, you know that after I left Peter's company and joined Uncle Greg, my whole family pretty much lost their minds. They've been calling me a traitor, accusing me of tearing the family apart, and just generally acting like I'm some kind of villain. The only person who hasn't completely cut me off is my mom, but even she's been distant and weird ever since I found out she was hiding stuff about Greg. But what happened a few days ago? That's the real kicker. I finally found out the whole truth about why Greg got pushed out of the family business, and let me tell you, it's worse than I ever imagined. So, it all started when Greg invited me over to his house for dinner. He wanted me to meet his wife, Sarah, since we'd been working so closely together lately. I didn't think much of it. It seemed like a normal family dinner, and I figured it'd be good to get to know Sarah since she's technically my aunt. I'd only seen her a few times at family gatherings way back when, but she always kept her distance from our side of the family, so I never really knew her. Dinner was fine, nothing special. Sarah's nice enough, though a bit on the quiet side. The conversation was pretty casual at first, just business talk, and a bit about how things were going at the company. But after we ate, Greg sent Sarah upstairs to rest. She wasn't feeling well. And that's when things got interesting. Once we were alone, Greg sat down across from me, gave me this serious look, and said, "Jen, I think it's time I told you the real reason I left the family business." Now, I already knew there was something shady that went down between him, Peter, and my mom, but I wasn't expecting the full story to be as insane as it was. Greg took a deep breath and started talking. He told me that years ago, way before the big fight that got him kicked out of the business, he and my mom used to be really close, like too close. He didn't say it outright, but I could tell from the way he was talking that my mom had feelings for him. Yeah, that kind of close. Greg went on to explain that my mom had been unhappy in her marriage to my dad for a while, which I kinda knew. But I didn't know just how bad it was. Apparently, she used to confide in Greg about it all the time, talking about how she felt trapped and like she'd married the wrong man. And Greg, trying to be a good brother-in-law, just listened and tried to be supportive. He thought it was harmless. But things started to get weird when my mom began dropping hints that she wished she'd married him instead of my dad. At this point, I'm sitting there, mouth hanging open because, like, what? I mean, I know my mom isn't perfect, but the idea that she would have gone after Greg, my dad's own brother, that's just a whole new level of messed up. Anyway, Greg told me that things came to a head one Thanksgiving. This was around 6 years ago. The whole family was at our house for the holiday, and at some point, my mom pulled Greg into the kitchen under the pretense of needing help with something. He said he didn't think anything of it at the time, but once they were alone, she cornered him and told him she wanted to leave my dad and be with him. Greg was shocked. He tried to let her down easy, saying that he loved my dad like a brother and that there was no way he could ever betray him like that. But my mom wouldn't let it go. She got upset, saying she didn't care anymore and that she knew Greg felt something for her too. He told me it was one of the most awkward moments of his life, and just as he was trying to leave the kitchen, my dad walked in. Of course, my dad freaked out. He didn't see everything that happened, but he saw them standing way too close, and that was enough. My dad immediately accused Greg of trying to steal his wife, and my mom. Instead of coming clean, she panicked and went along with it. She started saying that Greg had been trying to make a move on her for years, that he'd been manipulating her and trying to break up their marriage. Greg was basically thrown out of the house that night, and that's when my mom started spreading rumors that Greg was also stealing money from the family business. She told Peter and my dad that Greg had been planning to start his own company behind their backs, using the family's money to fund it. And since everyone was already pissed at him for what they thought was an affair, they believed her. No one even gave Greg a chance to explain. I was stunned. I mean, I knew there was something fishy about the way Greg was forced out, but this was on a whole other level. My mom had completely destroyed his reputation to save herself. And the worst part? I'd been in the dark about all of it. After Greg finished telling me everything, he just sat there waiting for my reaction. I didn't even know what to say. How do you process something like that? My mom had lied to everyone, to the whole family, and ruined Greg's life because she was scared of getting caught. And now, years later, I was the one dealing with the fallout because I chose to work for him. I didn't tell Greg how disgusted I felt. I couldn't. I just nodded, thanked him for being honest, and told him I needed some time to think. Then I left. But the second I got home, I sat in my car for like a solid hour, just trying to wrap my head around it all. Part of me wanted to confront my mom right then and there, to call her out for everything she'd done. But another part of me, I didn't even know if I wanted to hear her side of it. What could she possibly say to justify what she did? How do you forgive someone for something like that? It's been a few days since I found out, and I still haven't said anything to her. I haven't told anyone, actually. I've just been sitting with this knowledge, trying to figure out what to do next. I feel like I've been betrayed all over again. Not just by Peter or Mark, but by my own mom. I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at her the same way again. And the worst part? I'm starting to wonder if I'm just destined to be the scapegoat in this family. First, they screw me over with the business, and now this? It's like no matter what I do, I'm always the one who ends up hurt. I don't know what my next move is. I guess I'll just have to figure it out as I go. But one thing's for sure, I'm not letting this family drag me down anymore. They can keep their secrets, but I'm done being part of it. Update 3. Alright, so here's the thing. After everything that went down with Greg and finding out all that messed up stuff about my mom, I've been in this weird place. You'd think that after hearing all that, I'd be done, right? Like, cut ties completely and move on with my life. But it's not that simple. It's never that simple when family's involved. And I guess I'm still trying to figure out where I stand in all of this. It's been a few weeks since Greg dropped that truth bomb. Sorry, I know I said I wouldn't use that word. I still haven't confronted my mom about it. Every time I think about calling her, I just freeze. It's like, what do you even say? Hey, remember that time you tried to cheat on Dad with his brother and then ruined his life to cover it up? I just don't think I have it in me to start that conversation. But here's the thing that's been eating at me. I can't avoid her forever. I mean, she's my mom. Despite everything, despite all the lies and the betrayal, part of me still wants to hear her side of things. Maybe it's some kind of messed up hope that she'll have an explanation. Or maybe I just want her to finally admit it and apologize. I don't know. I'm just tired of feeling like I'm walking around with this massive secret weighing me down. Meanwhile, work at Greg's company has been intense. In a good way, though. We've been growing faster than I expected, and a bunch of people from Peter's company have actually jumped ship to join us. That's been kind of surreal, honestly. Some of these people I've known for years, but it's like they're seeing me in a completely different light now that I'm not just David's daughter or Peter's niece. I'm the CFO of one of their biggest competitors, and they treat me with so much more respect now. There's been this rumor going around that Peter's company is struggling since Mark took over. I don't have any solid proof, but people are talking. Apparently, Mark's in way over his head, which isn't surprising at all considering the guy has zero experience running a business. It's kind of satisfying to hear that, I'm not gonna lie. Karma's doing its thing, I guess. But even with all the work stuff going well, I can't shake this feeling of being stuck in the middle. My family's been treating me like an outcast ever since I joined Greg, and now with everything I know about my mom, it's even worse. I feel like I'm walking this weird line between being part of the family and being totally cut off from them. It's like they don't want me around, but they also can't stop talking about me. I got a message from one of my cousins the other day, Jake, who's always been kind of neutral in all this. He's not like the others who are either on Peter's side or Greg's. He's just there. Anyway, he reached out and said he heard I'd been causing problems and wanted to know my side of the story. I didn't really know how to respond to that. Causing problems? What problems? The only thing I did was leave a toxic work environment and take a better job. But apparently in my family, that's enough to make me the villain. So I told Jake the basics, how Peter screwed me over by giving Mark the CEO position, how I reached out to Greg, and how I've been doing my own thing ever since. I didn't tell him about the whole thing with my mom and Greg, though. That's not something I'm ready to share with anyone yet. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it myself. Jake was surprisingly cool about it. He didn't take sides or tell me I was wrong. He just said he understood why I did what I did, and that he didn't blame me for leaving. It was honestly kind of refreshing to talk to someone who wasn't automatically against me. We ended up chatting for a while, and he mentioned that a lot of people in the family were starting to feel weird about how Peter was running things. He said there's been tension at family gatherings lately, with people whispering about how Peter's decisions are hurting the business. I didn't say much to that, but inside I was like, yeah, no kidding. Peter's always been one to act like he knows best, even when he clearly doesn't. He just doesn't like admitting he's wrong. Anyway, after my talk with Jake, I started thinking more about my next steps. I've been in this weird limbo for a while now, and I'm starting to realize that I need to take control of my own narrative. I can't keep waiting for my family to come around or for my mom to finally tell the truth. It's time to focus on myself and my own future. I made a decision that I think might surprise a lot of people. I'm going to stop trying to fix things with my family. I've spent so much of my life bending over backward for them, trying to be the good daughter, the perfect employee, the peacemaker, but where has that gotten me? Stuck in the middle of their drama, constantly feeling like I'm not enough. I'm done with that. It doesn't mean I'm cutting them off completely, at least not yet. But I'm done letting their opinions control my decisions. If they want to see me as the traitor or the problem, fine. Let them. I know the truth and I know my worth. As for my mom, well, that's still complicated. I'm not ready to confront her yet, but I think I will eventually. I just need more time to figure out what I want from that conversation. Do I want an apology? Do I want her to admit what she did? Or do I just want closure so I can move on? I don't know yet, but I'll get there when I get there. For now, I'm focusing on the positive. Work's going great. I'm making new connections, and I'm finally starting to feel like I'm in control of my own life again. It's a weird feeling, but a good one. So yeah, that's where I'm at. It's been a long journey to get here, and I know it's far from over, but I'm ready to see where it goes.